Hi, my name is Daimond. I'll be showing you some basic and advanced uses of decals. I'll also show you how to make and import decals. First, let's open Creation Editor, and we'll open a sword. It's not the most basic use, but an effective use to at least use as a template to mold a weapon if you have a good enough decal, an easy way to give details. For starters, you want to create a flat surface and put down a hilt. I already got both of those on here. And make that visible. This way, if you have the hilt up, you won't make your sword too large. Otherwise you can make it too large for the image you're using. If you're wanting to use the image, you don't want it to look too off. But that's not really what we're here to deal with. It's just a sword, just it's a use of a decal. After cutting some of this down, import it into the game and check it out to see if it isn't too large. So decals will cover parts, be it guns, hilts, whatever. Now you're probably already asking, why do I have this sideways as a decal? Reason being is that I get a little bit more resolution this way, because otherwise you got a 512 by 512 decal is the only size you can use. Well, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That, I know you're probably wondering what the hell is he talking math to me for. Well, that gives me 724 across here in pixels. So that's effectively 212 more resolution than I would have this way. So that's why I chose this. Now this doesn't work for everything, but when it does, I would suggest using it, because you can get that slight bit more detail than you would the other way. Now let's go to something a little bit more in depth. So we'll go over to helicopters, we'll go to TIE Interceptor. As you can see here, both the front and the back look the same, but this is all decals. Now you can only use a maximum of 4 decals per model. But you can see here I got more than 4. Well, technically not. It's still 4 decals only. But you can use these 4 decals so far any amount of time. So I got 1, 2, 3, and 4 uses of that same decal. 2 here and 2 here. Now I couldn't fix the back because I ran out of the amount of decals to use, which I'm going to be changing. Figured out a few things since the couple minutes I used doing this. But in doing that this way, as you can see here, I got a white line running down as a seam. That's not part of the decal, it's part of the game, unfortunately. I couldn't get that out anyway. You may be thinking, well, I don't see it on the inside. Well, technically it is there, it's just, you see it's right inside. Because another use of the decals is that they layer. So the first one you put down will be overwritten by the second decal, and so on and so forth. So like the center body here, it was second to last, this I put on last, and the wings I put on first. So if we grab this decal and move it across, you can see it doesn't overwrite this decal here, but it'll overwrite the wing. So in figuring out exactly how that layers, I can now switch this wing back to just one solid one, but I can't use the one I got here, such as this. Let's delete a few of these things. It's much larger, needs to be manipulated. You'll see it better if I widen this a bit. it doesn't fit right on this wing. So when I had it, the top was way up here, as you can see down here. This actually used to touch down here on the very bottom. I chopped a lot off to make it look the way it should look by doing it this way, and now a different way I'm going to do it, which I'll show you shortly. So before we get into that, we'll undo these so I can show you something else. The other thing about decals is they don't use normal maps, so there is no shadow and lighting on them. So you have to create your own shadows if you're wanting to use them in this manner. I started a little bit over in Photoshop. It's not this one you see here. You'll see it in a bit. But the other thing decals do, because it doesn't have any shadow and lighting, which I'm hoping they do change, is that it does hide stuff. Right in here is actually a big defect that this is hiding because there's no shadow and lighting. So I dragged this out of the way, you can see it. See, since the game has shadow and lighting, you can see all that. But with the decal there, you really got to get in a weird angle to really notice it. Which, in other words, you'll never see it when you're doing it in this manner. But we'll flip over to the other one that we're actually going to work on. So now this one's exactly the same, but we want to do one thing for the wings first. So let's go up to our little gizmo here, click on this so we get situated directly on the side. Now we want to try to line this up somewhat perfectly square. It'll never be perfect. No matter how much you fiddle with it, you'll never get it perfectly. I'll line this up here a bit more. Now this is something similar to what you do use in 3D programs, but unfortunately this is more like using a butcher knife compared to a laser scalpel, because in the 3D one it'll flatten this out so we can run our textures to it. Well, in this manner we have to sort of manipulate it to fit this wing on this angle, but if you're too close, you can see you're looking sort of up on the wing, whereas if you zoom back to where it looks like it's not really changing the angle anymore, say right back about there, because we don't really have to worry about the resolution that we're going to drag into Photoshop and mold it to this wing. So that looks pretty good there. Then you just take a screenshot, which would be F12 in game, or I'm using Radeon Pro, which I've set up for another key. So you have to pull it out from there. So now we'll go to Photoshop. So the first thing we want to do is go into images, and we want to get some images for the TIE interceptor. You want to come up here, click on advanced search because you want higher resolution. So we'll go 800 by 600 or larger. Now if you're not really worried too much about coloring and whatnot, you can go for images such as these. Now if you hold on control when you click a link, it'll open up a new tab, so don't remove the last one. You can use these and color them yourself after cutting them out, but I'm not going to bother doing that. What I went with was this one. It's a really good image, good front shot. It's a little harder to find a back shot, and you can find a side wing as well. You'll need to get all the parts. In case you've never done this before, bring this up, right click, come down to save as, save somewhere you can find it. Now we'll take it into Photoshop. There's a few good programs out there if you don't have Photoshop. such as, we'll go back to the front, as paint.net. You can get this for free. Haven't used this in a long time. What you're looking for mainly is the layers, like down here, which Photoshop has. So we'll open up the wing first. Here's all my layers, so I can turn off different parts. That's what you want. So before we bring in that photo that we used, first gonna trim this up a little bit. So we want to get rid of these areas here. Who knows, you may want to keep them, but me, I was gonna get rid of them. So there's a few ways of doing it. You can use your magic wand tool, which does a nice job at selecting, as long as you're on the right layer. Does a nice job selecting. Does okay in here. As you can see, it's not perfect. Does pretty good there, but it doesn't do good here. This color is too close to the other, so it starts selecting all of it. So we want to get rid of that. Bring up our polygon lasso tool. This works well. Come down here and click on a point. Draw out your area. There you go. And as you can see, I didn't quite get all that, or maybe I didn't want to get all that. So we can go to our box selection, rectangle, and now, just like in the game, you can either hold down the shift to bring up plus to add to it, such as there, or the alt, so I can subtract from that. So I can refine this a little bit more. And you can just delete the area. And that's what we're looking for all of these. I'll just undo that because I've already done that once. Just in case I ever need to come back to this, I always like to have a copy. So if you're going to start deleting that, come over here, right click, go down to duplicate layer, and this is the layer that you're going to cut and fiddle with. So, say we cut out those areas. Now, I don't like on here, I don't like having all this shadowing and whatnot. I like this top side though. So, what I'm going to do is select this area. Make sure I got it somewhere near the center that I want. I do. But just in case you didn't, right click in the area while you still got it selected up here. Come down to transform selection. And now I can move this in and out to select where I want. So click OK. Hit Control C to copy, or come up to Edit, go down to Copy, and then we want to go to Select Inverse. So now it's selected this area down here, the opposite. And we want to delete that and Control V to paste it. Now it automatically highlights the layer we just pasted. So now we want to go up to Select again. Come down to, come to Edit, Transform, and go flip vertically. So now it's flipped it to the right direction. Come in here, drag this into place. Snaps in. So we can click over here. So now we got a nice duplicated wing, so it's even. I don't have too much shadow on either side. So now you can select both those layers and merge them. Now I suggest putting them into groups, such as I did here. I did this here already. Let me get rid of the effects. And then I selected both of these and duplicated them, and then merged it together. So once you duplicate, you come down here and you hit merge, and it merges as one, as you see here. but I like keeping those just in case I need to fiddle with it. So now I have it here. Now the reason why you see 2 is I wanted to darken up some of this area. So I duplicated it, highlighted that area, and came up here to selection and came to hard light. I liked hard light, but you can switch it to different ones, see as it does different effects. This hard light was the one that I chose, looks the best. Now if you have it in a folder, come down here and click on the folder to create a new group, and just drag and drop them into that group. That way you can hide them. Now you got all the selection you want. And then we'll come up here. We wanted to grab a texture to fill in here. Now this was some sort of cardboard cutout that I found on the internet for a TIE fighter. So I just selected a bit of this area here for the texture and then copied it and pasted it into its own layer. So let's get rid of that. So I got that there. Make sure you got your selection tool up here. Now try to make it so it gets somewhat tileable. I didn't bother fiddling with this too much. Make sure your layer's selected and just hold down your Alt and click and drag on that one. So it'll snap to the old layer and it'll do the same thing. Now this one I'm not going to bother fiddling with, but I fiddled with it a bit to get it better on the next section. You want to keep tiling these after you made this a little bit more invisible, but I didn't go too far on doing that. So we'll bring up that layer. As you can see here, it's not perfect, but it's fine. So it's a lot of different little layers. So just in case I need to come back to that, like normal, right click, duplicate layer, come down here to merge group. Now we got that group selected. We want to bring this selection back up and highlight one of these 2 layers. Now we want to go to our magic wand tool and you can highlight these areas. Like before, hold down the shift to add these areas, because unlike before, they're not going to transfer into here. Now with those selected, come over here to your layer of texture, go to select, modify, and expand. Go by about 5 pixels. As you can see, it selects a bigger range. Come back to select and select inverse. And make sure you're on your texture layer and just hit delete. Now as you see, it's all there. So we'll hide that layer. I already got this one made up. Alright, now that we got that, before we start manipulating with that photo that we took in game, we want to make this look a little bit nicer. Right now it's looking kind of bland. So I already added some effects to this, but if you have it in a group and it does both layers at the same time, just double click on the side here. I'll show you again. Just right next to the name on the right side. I'll bring up this layer and I put a bevel on it. If you watch here, I open, I gotta close this first. So I turn the effects back on. Gave it a slight indent to make it look like it has some depth to it. So I just gave it an outer bevel, so it's actually giving it both sides because this is empty. Just change the angle, not from global light. Change it to smooth. Change the contour. You can change the contour here, but I sort of made my own. So you can drag these edges over to the right spot and get the effect you want. Now you can do all sorts of stuff. I'm not going to run you through everything, but this is what I liked. And then on this one here, the actual texture, I did another effect on this one. I gave a bit of a gradient overlay. Gives a nice little effect because it makes it look like the light's shining here, and these are sort of bent off to the side, giving a bit of a shadow. So I just reversed it and changed it to reflective. And that's pretty much that. So we'll take these two layers now, duplicate them, and merge that group. Merge those layers together. Turn off all these other ones. So now we're working with this layer. So now we want to get rid of this outside edge because it may screw you up later, maybe something you don't want. First, turn one of these old layers back on. Go back to the magic tool. I'm going to click on the outside so it selects all that. Then we can turn all that off. Go back to our duplicate copy and hit delete. Gets rid of all that. Then you can hit Control D, which will deselect, by the way. Now we want to drag in our screenshot. So we want to make this fairly large. Now if you hold down Shift, it'll drag it from one corner and retain the aspect ratio. Now if you hold Shift and Alt, it'll retain the aspect ratio, but as you can see, it drags it in all directions. That's getting fairly close. Make sure we're just in the bounds here. Now hit OK, or just select another tool. Highlight all that, go up to Image, and Crop. That way our edges are a little bit closer together. Oop. Oh, sorry, you got to raster size it first before you can do that. Okay, let's go through that again. Image and Crop. And Control D to deselect. So now it's a little bit better. We'll drag that under our other layer so it's over top. Highlight it. Turn down the opacity. Now we want to get this in the right size. So now we can go back to our other layer. Stuck on there. There we go. Click on the image. Now we're just going to use the Shift and drag it into the right. You can use Shift Alt. Bring it to about the right size. It's looking fairly close, but it's a little bit off. Like I said, it's not perfect to what it will be in game, but we don't have to be perfect. So we'll apply transformation. Now, we'll bring up the opacity again on this. As you can see, I want to cut across here. So I'll pick our other selection, bring it back up, so you can see what I'm doing. I'm using the scroll wheel to zoom. There's other ways to do it by using the tool down here, but you can go into preferences and set it scroll wheel to zoom. I prefer that. So now we want our rectangle selection. Highlight all of this. That looks pretty good. sure you're selecting. Cut that, just repaste it. And you can hit V just to go back to your selection tool there. There's a little bit I got on the end here. I have to erase that. Make life a little bit easier, otherwise it won't snap right. You want to line these back up if it wants to cooperate. And you're going to want to do that on the bottom side. I won't go through every detail, but you'll see the end result. So now, as you can see, I can crunch this down. Now it's going to deform this a bit, and this won't look quite as nice as this one, but it'll be okay. It won't look quite as good. Now this won't be perfect, so you probably want to actually leave it slightly higher than that. Hit OK. And now we can drag up the opacity back up to 100%. Click on it. And let's move the transform line. And it looks pretty good. And you just do the same thing at the bottom. So then we just want to get rid of this. And then once as you can see, there's a bit of a discrepancy here. That's pretty easy to fix. All we do is make sure we're under both those layers, create a new layer underneath, and then just grab the paintbrush tool. There's the brush tool. Now if you hold down the Alt, you can select the color. We'll select that color there. And when I'm painting on this, but I actually selected the color on one of these other layers. So when I paint this in, it sort of vanishes. It's a real cheap and easy way to hide that. Went a little bit over there, but it doesn't really matter. See, once I do that at the bottom, then we'll save it out as like tie wing 1 or just tie wing. And that's pretty much that. Now we'll save this for now because I'll move on to the body. Now I'll show you the finalized ones in game. So this here, turn off all this stuff. Of course, this was the original one. This one you can use a lot of. You always got to make sure you're on the right layer and it's raster sized. So this you can select it all, remove the sections you want. So you don't delete everything. And you'll end up with a body like this. Now I removed the glass because I added it back in here. Now so I can put the ass end back in from another photo. But as you can see here, this looks a lot different than that one. Got rid of all the shadowing and whatnot. It's not perfect. Tend to fix that. As you can see, there's some of the shadowing still left. It's because it's actually 2 images. I just took this image, copied it, flipped it, added it back, and then gave it a lighten. You can change a lot depending on what it is, as you can see here. But my only problem is right in here. As you can see, it looks kind of funky. It doesn't quite fit right. So what we can do is we can take an eraser tool, make sure we're on the right body. I think it's this one. Check. Yep, that was a good one. So I'm removing that section so it keeps that highlight. As you can see on this one, that was all looking good. Just like on this side, it looks pretty good over there. So this one we do the same thing, but we got to select the other body. I want to get rid of too much, and then I can manipulate all this other stuff, but I won't go through all that right now with you. So once I get it looking to where I want, you can add all sorts of little things. Like I started to do a little something here to pop some of it out. It's not quite looking right. And then on this one here, I started doing some highlights. So let's pop in the window for the hell of it. As you can see here, I started doing a little bit of highlights to make some areas pop out more. So give a little bit of a shadowing effect. It's nothing really fancy. It's actually, if I turn off the effects, so I got too much effects on that one. So that's not the one I was looking for. It's this one here. As you can see there, it's actually redlined so I could really see it. Then I just gave it a black overlay and gave it an outer glow. Let's turn to black again. And same thing in this group. So I got these groups are different sets of lines, so I know they're all separated. And let me get to the selection tool and show transformed. This one here is just this little line down here. But since they're in this group, they all follow this effect. There's all sorts of stuff you can do with this. I'm not going to go through everything, of course. But what we will move on to is we'll get rid of that and move on to the ass end. I couldn't find one that looked quite as good as this one. But I did find this. So we want to move this down underneath the layers. So first we got to accept it. And we'll raster size the layer, drag it down underneath everything, move it somewhere to the center, hold down the Shift and Alt, drag it to the size roughly I want. Now this is just all rough and crude, so nothing special about this. I'll fix it at a later date. Now we'll select one of these other body parts. Accept that. Select the body parts. Get our magic wand tool. Select that area. And we'll modify the edge and expand by 5 pixels again. Select inverse. Select that model and delete the rest. We just want that. Now Control D. What we want to go to do is go down to paintbrush and color replacement, because we don't want this white, we want this color here. So now that we got a color replacement, we'll select by holding Alt, select the color. Now let's take a darker color up here. Now we can just paint over this. Make it a similar type color. Pretty rough and crude, but it's effective. Doesn't look too bad, but there's a lot of work to go on that. But it's good enough for now. So since we're putting this one in the front down first, or second, it's not really going to overwrite the body too much, but we still want to get rid of some of this. Now, I had cropped this before, which was this image. Since I didn't take a photo of it. But this works pretty good. Just beyond the knuckles. Unfortunately, I didn't take a photo of that to show you that one, but you can do the same thing. What we want to do is crop this. I want to select both bodies. Somewhere about there. I got to individually delete. I'm going to select each one individually because there's 2 layers there actually. Now we want to select all this. Highlight all the areas so they all rotate. Because we're going to rotate this now. Try to use the maximum size because this image is actually larger than 512. So our selection tool, get them all highlighted. Now what you might want to do is, like I normally say, duplicate the layers. So you got these layers and these are the new layers. You might even want to stick them into a group. So if you hold down the shift key with them selected and hit your folder, adds everything into that layer. Put these into its own layer too, just so we know what we're using. So select this group. Now we'll start turning this. I want this on about a 45, so I can select all this up here and go to 45 instead. Hit enter. Hold down shift and alt. Actually, let's zoom out of here a little bit. Shift and alt. And we'll go with something like that. Let's first drag down some lines. If you hold on the ruler and drag them over, they'll snap to the center if you come over. So you can sort of see how centered you actually are. This looks centered, but it's not actually centered, just because that. That'll be close enough. We can do a lot of manipulating inside. So now we can save this out. Oh, first we're going to do that. So we can save this image out, but we want to go to image size now. Now you want to reduce this to 512. Now we can save this out as a PNG. Say save as tie body. Then flick over. And which one is it now? Ah, there it is. Remove that and save that one. So we want the front and we want the back. So say tie body front, tie body back, or tie body 1 and 2, whichever you like. And that's pretty much it. We'll go back in the game and layer it in there. One more thing before going to game, just in case you didn't watch one of the other videos. Now, an easy way to get these models or these decals into game is that I found right click on the picture, come down to properties, and then you can select this whole thing here. And just right click, copy, and close that off. Just remember the names. When you go in game, all you have to do is type this little bit out instead of typing the whole thing out. Now we'll open up our tie interceptor. We'll add those decals. So if you copied those decals before, or the path to it, you can just click on here and hit Control. It'll fill most of it in. / win.png. Great. Now when doing this, make sure you got the X mirrored. It does both sides. This into place. Looks pretty good. Good enough. Now make sure to turn off that mirroring, or it's going to mirror the other parts. Yeah, this part can be a little difficult because, especially on a surface like this, you can sometimes be slightly off, so it won't be perfectly square to the back. So you'll want to try to see where the exact center is. Add that decal. Control again. Create. And I'll put this at about 6 for now. About 1. Looks like it might be a little large, but we'll fix that. First we want to rotate this 45 degrees back. Move this to about the halfway point. Now as you can see, I got a little manipulation to do. These are a little large, so it's overlapping there, so we might have to cut that down once we finish tweaking everything. But as we can tell, I need to increase the size. That's stretching wrong. So let's try 6.4. Still a bit wrong. 6.5. Nope. 6. Looking better, but still not quite right. 6.8. That looks a bit better. So now we'll do the back side. Square this off. Lined up pretty good. Now the only reason why that's like that is because I never finished highlighting this side. So when I flipped it around, once I finish that, you won't really notice too much of a difference there. Still will, it's not perfect. But there's other ways around it to get rid of that seam and whatnot. Such as, click on, put this one down last. Put this up to 2. Why? Bring this over. Cover most of this so it looks seamless there. But no matter what, we still got to fix that part. You can do some manipulation of fixing, like say something else you can do. Let me get back to Decals. For now, let's delete that. Actually, let's undo that. Just move this. We'll delete that one for now, and that one. So you can punch some of these parts out for the hell of it. Move this back like that. It's all hollow in there, so we can give some more fake depth to it. Remove some of that, and we'll move a bit more. There we go. The shadowing looks a little bit more correct instead of just something like that. Nice and flat, but it still gives the effect. And just a little bit more. You can pop out some other areas. I can't right now because this is right on the bloody edge. So I can't go any farther this way. But this whole thing I'm going to redo. It's a little large here in the center. The wings I want to pull in a bit to do some of that manipulation. But for the hell of it, let's go have a look with it in game. So I'll export this out. Well, it looks pretty good. A big streak across here. As you can tell, it's fairly bright. You can change the tones and whatnot. But as you can see from the shine across the top of the wing, of actual reflection from normal maps. And this has a fair bit of work to do. Well, that's it. Hopefully you enjoy and see what you can make.